Raise your hand. Stand up and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Scott Roberts. I belong to the 50th APS over here, and I just signed up last month to start taking flight lessons.
Welcome. Okay, and in the corner.
Hi, Buck Kitchen. Retired from Travis a couple years ago, moved down here with DCMA, and I only have about 110 hours, so looking forward to having some.
All right. Yeah, you flew out of Travis Club up there, right?
Yes,
Yeah. And what kind of airplanes they got up there?
all new ones.
Yeah. That's. But see,
ones that fly.
yeah, they do. But they also were handed a lot of money too.
Selling them too because they don't carry anybody.
So, okay, anybody else? I think that was it, unless David G, you're not new. Okay. I think that's it. Oh, Kevin just walked in the door. A little bit late, yeah. Okay, has anybody just recently gotten a new rating, pilot's license, or anything like that? And this includes Air Force or any other, some of your airline guys also. Anything that you acquired, anything that was taken away from you by the FAA. Yeah. Well, gee whiz, boy. All you guys are not going anywhere? Has anybody soloed?
Andrew has his check ride on Friday.
That's right. I know. I was gonna mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guy sitting way back there with he's really scared to death because on Friday he's gonna go for his private pilot check ride, and it's a new examiner too. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, we don't know who this examiner is, so you're gonna have to write a big report on that one. So.
I got all the info.
Okay, good. Yeah, I hope you do.
All the info on it.
Yeah. Okay, anybody has anything that they can tell the rest of us and you won't get in trouble? Bob has promised me he won't turn you into the FAA or anything like that. But anything that's worthy telling to the rest of the guys, doesn't have to be just safety, it can be just about anything that you've experienced, and that includes Air Force pilots too. Bill.
Witnessed the prop strike the other day.
Okay. Yeah.
Prop strike.
Where did that happen at?
Over at Hemet.
At Hemet? Wow.
If any of you are familiar with the Hemet Airport, the little cafe there, Joan and I were sitting there having lunch the other day, and this guy in this RV-6 comes roaring in there, and he runs one wing up over a picnic table and runs smack in with the propeller to the next picnic table. It looked like a buzzsaw going on. So he gets out of his plane and he looks at the propeller and he starts moving the prop that it had stopped. And I hollered out the window. I said, "Hey, did you shut the mags off on that thing?" And he jumped back.
Oh, gee.
Switches off the mags. They push the plane back out of the way. He and his buddy come in and they sit down and they have lunch like nothing happened. I went out there and I took pictures. I took pictures of the propellers because the tips of the propellers were bent in like this. He goes out after he has lunch, he goes back out, gets in his plane with his buddy, and they taxi out with this thing going like this. Goes out to the end of the runway, runs it up. Joan and I, we got in the truck, I swear, went out and watched this guy take off. He does a run up, and he flies away in that thing. Wow.
Oh, gee.
Hey, it's experimental.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, gee. Holy smoke. Man, oh man.
I got one too, Roger.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other day, probably a week and a half ago, I was flying over at Chino. We were I think we're landing on 26 left, was it? So southern runway there. And we were right in our midfield downwind. I was in Cessna 150, and we hit a red-tailed hawk over there.
Oh, gee.
So I was just like pummeling down. Like I was like doing something like with the carburetor heat, I can't remember. Like I had my head down, my student just goes, "Bird." And I look up, I see a bird right in the windshield. So I slam forward on the controls. Right as I slam forward, the bird hits the top of the airplane, right near the two comm radio antennas. And then it takes the ELT antenna halfway off, breaks the ELT antenna off, and then it hits the rudder on the way back. It put a little dent in our rudder over there.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was definitely pretty interesting. And I believe, Dave, you would know this one. If it goes through the windshield, you can't maintain altitude at
Unless you kick
150.
the back window out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But what about
Yeah.
like opening the side windows? Because that thing had two side
It is a
windows.
possibility, you can open the doors and windows.
Yeah.
It might help you.
Yeah.
Let that
Yeah.
air flow
There's
out.
been occasions where people have survived because it's like a parachute,
Mhm.
and that's to get the doors open, immediately
Yeah.
get the doors open.
yeah.
You can survive out of it. There's been occasions of people surviving, but boy, I tell you, you gotta really.
The plane goes down real quick. Yeah, goes real quick.
Never does.
The seat's,
Yeah.
the seat's gonna be dirty and the bird's gonna be pissed off.
But, I mean, I got pretty lucky with it, because if I didn't slam those controls forward, that bird probably would have gone through the prop and through the windscreen.
Yeah.
And not only do I have a half-dead bird, I have a hawk that's trying to claw at me now, and I can't hold my altitude at full power. So, it was definitely an interesting scenario, so I would say
Yeah.
definitely do
Yeah.
what you can to avoid birds. I mean,
Yeah, Bill.
Whose airplane was this?
That
not
was,
my airplane.
no, he
over
flies
at
for Corona too.
Their airplane you went out there?
Yeah, I flew out there, and it was interesting. They take all the statistics on bird strikes, so I can give my name, where we were.
So you reported?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Good.
And they use that for statistics.
Yay!
Done good.
Yeah. So if we hit a bird, make sure it's you,
Yeah,
because you know what to do. Yeah.
For everybody else that's knowing how to do it, contact my office, we're experts in that.
Yes, and Bill is an expert at that. Yeah. Okay, anybody else? These have been two good stories here. Where's George Watson? Yeah, you always have some good stories at your airport.
Well, that was crash at Ramona, 182. Gentleman hadn't flown in about 10 years. His airplane had sat out on the ramp a while, and he decided to go fly. Company offered him to try. Why don't you let us? No, leave me alone. And he took off Sunday before last, and they saw him take off. They got in the golf cart, went to the other side, waiting for him because they knew he was going to crash.
Oh, gee.
They knew when he took off that he didn't have the propeller forward. They heard that.
Hmm.
They thought he was going to stall out after he got off because they could see the top of the airplane going up. But he finally got it going, came back around, left downwind runway 27, going too fast, hit on his nose gear, bounced 3 times. The 3rd time he was off the runway to the side. the left
Wow.
side of the runway. So
I heard about
he
that.
didn't get hurt, but needless to say, beautiful airplane, just messed up.
Wow. Boy, it's been kind of
How
a,
long was the airport closed down for that one?
I didn't close the airport.
What?
He bounced off far enough for me to leave it.
Yeah, because the reason I asked, my student was flying down to Ramona that day,
Huh?
and I guess right when he got there, the guy had did it.
Yeah.
And then I guess the tower said, hold on, we got an airplane. with
Yeah,
us. So my
I
student
had
flew
one
back.
airplane struggle a little bit, but I told him to leave it open after let him land.
Yeah.
wow. Okay, anybody else? It's kind of hard to follow up with these three.
I can make something up.
Yeah, you probably can, especially with Civil Air Patrol. Yeah, we always have a lot of stuff. Okay, anybody else? John? Well, you could talk a little bit about what happened over at Norton, or San Bernardino. Where they,
We're doing an approach to San Bernardino and doing an ILS, and so SoCal hands us off to a tower. So we call the tower up, and this guy must have been having a bad day or something. Well, he said, are you supposed to be calling the Riverside Tower or San Bernardino Tower? We said San Bernardino Tower. After the 3rd time we answered that question, he said, okay, and he just sounded gruff. And so we're continuing on our approach for about a 5-mile final. He tells us to go around. In other words, go away, don't bother me anymore, I guess. I didn't understand that. There was another plane in the pattern. I didn't know where he was. I didn't see him. So either one of two things: the airplane was behind us and we were in his way,
well,
or
I
two
think-
airplanes matched this guy out. I don't know.
could it be ATC got it
You
messed
see how
up?
busy San Bernardino gets.
That's why we go over
They
there.
have like 3 or 4 planes a day.
Yeah.
Come on.
Huh. Yeah, that's a strange one.
Too many.
Yeah. Okay, the Aero Club manager's gonna get up, and then what we're gonna do is probably right after you, and then I'll ask if you wanna talk about anything. And, we'll cover a little bit of the SOPs real quick. And then we're gonna go into checklist. What's a checklist? I have no idea. Okay, Bob, go ahead and do your stuff now.
Got a lot of things to cover that have taken place in the last couple weeks. CAP members, under the new rules and regulations, you're not going to be allowed to bring any guest on board. You can come on board, but your guest won't be on board, will be able to come on board because you don't have one of these things or a military ID card. So that means that someone from the office is going to have to authorize the guest or escort that guest to the Aero Club. Now, this took place with Brandon Harrison last weekend.
Well, let's bring it current today. It happened to us.
So just be aware that these are the new rules that have come down, and there's regulations on that, and they're going to be real stringent. If you remember my talk a couple months ago, they're trying to get reader readouts, just like you have at the ski resorts, electronic readouts. That may solve something, since CAP members may be vetted or they may not be vetted. I'm not sure. Right now, you're vetted by your license, your driver's license, and your birth date and your name that I have to submit to security. And that's it. So just be aware. We're trying to resolve some issues here, and it's going to be very difficult for the next few months until something comes down on how this is going to work. There's a meeting going this week, I believe tomorrow, or it could have been today, in regards to security on this. And one of the questions in my email, going back to the individual who's in charge of this, is that to bring this up to see what can be done. And that includes, parents and stuff from Squadron 45 who's on the base. Luckily, there's about 2 or 3 lists for that squadron here on the base. So unless someone's part of the family, I'm not sure where it's going to go. Just be aware of it. Maintenance. I know David said it. We've covered some of this in regards to our standards meeting. We're beginning to find some issues with the aircraft, and I just want to address some of these again. As a club and a club member, it's your responsibility to ensure that the person who's after you in flying that aircraft is going to accept a clean airplane. We're beginning to see a little bit relaxing of cleaning the aircraft. And I'm not talking about just making sure the windshield is clean, but it's bug time. Get the water in that sludge out there and just get the leading edges and the struts and the nose cowling of these aircraft before the bugs dry. Because once they dry, they're harder than heck to get off. And we're still not allowed to get out to the wash rack. We figured out how we're going to do. The only other place we can do is fly it down to French Valley and use their free wash rack. Or go over to Redlands and use that free wash rack. So try and get most of this stuff off and be friendly to the individual. Some of the T-34s, the smoke systems drip a little bit of oil and it comes back on the belly. We're getting a little bit of oil on a couple aircraft down in the nose wheel. So in those nose wheel sections in the belly, let's get them clean for the next individual so that George or Malcolm or someone else who spends time out there, especially like Tyler, spends an hour and a half out there cleaning the airplane, leaves it clean for you, and you should have the same respect for the person afterwards.
Bob, I was out there at 3-4 Whiskey Papa. They doing a check ride with Mr. Lowe and Long, sorry. And I spent 45 minutes under there, and the belly or the nose gear section, looked like it hadn't been touched. More than maybe just a cursory wipe off. I was scrubbing and rubbing like a crazy man to try to get it decent, and then the bottom of the belly of the fuselage all the way back, I was rubbing it, and I said, wait a minute, and there was a film on there, and I had to go through like 2 layers of film to get it back to the paint. No friggin' excuse for that, none. And I'm gonna start screaming for people, and you guys should do the same thing when you're flying. If the thing isn't clean when you go out there, you do something about it or call the guy. So from now on, names are gonna be mentioned, and, you know, Bob said he's gonna start finding people, if people don't, I mean, at least make an effort, for God's sakes. But that was ridiculous. Sorry.
Again, as a club, it's really Rogers and my own personal opinion is that we have the option of having people do certain things. We don't try and push it because of the regulations. We don't want to be a dictator up here, but really have some consideration for the next individual. Cancellations. People are canceling a flight or there's a no-show. Under the SOPs, we have the right to take and charge you for no-shows. There's one that took place last week. That person's going to be fined, or actually he'll pick up a percentage of that aircraft in regards to his no-show for that cancellation. When you put your name into an airplane and it goes on the schedule, there may be another person that wants to fly at the same time. So therefore, if you've got it between, we'll say 8 and 11, or 8 and 10, or 8 and 9, whatever it is, and that person, you've got a block, and then you don't show up, we just lost revenue. And that could go for any amount of people that's involved there. So be considerate of other individuals.
Can I touch up on that? Yeah, I've just noticed on Flight Schedule Pro, if it's more before 24 hours, I don't have the ability to cancel it.
Call us. You gotta call us.
Okay.
You call us and we'll take care of it.
Because like I'll look at it on the schedule and see if anybody's flying it after me, and if there's not, I've just kind of been ignoring it.
I don't know,
So,
Roger.
But I'll yeah, I just didn't want to annoy you guys. I didn't know.
I
if that
thought
would be-
that the instructors had that right
Yeah,
on 24 hour.
I still don't have it on my Flight Schedule Pro. I
Oh,
still
okay.
can't.
Well,
delete it.
yeah, okay, because it should have down there administrative rate for
Yeah,
you.
administrative.
Yeah,
But
well,
it's been
well,
typically when it's been overcast to like 1,000 feet, so I
Yeah.
mean, if I'm not flying it. Everybody else really going? Okay. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
You gotta call when I remember these.
Okay.
Yeah. Did someone have a hand up in the back? Andrew?
I had a question. I know usually before I come out, it's like right in that sweet spot where you can't delete the flight. And usually I try to get out here before everyone else flies. And say like you have like a segment pop up or, you know, bad weather, and you can't go in the program to cancel it. How do you rectify that issue?
Well, when it's weather, we understand that. That's an automatic.
Yeah, that's.
Like when we had the rains here, or the drizzle the other day, and the high winds. We've been very affected. This base this year has had more high winds than we've had in the past. And when they start out of the north and they move to the east and come out of the southwest, there's no way that you're going to be able to get off with an aircraft that only weighs 2,000 pounds, like the Alpha model. So the winds and the weather, we understand that. But if that's not an issue, then we have other issues that need to be addressed. So even though you can call us and say, you know, is the weather affecting us out here? Yeah, you can look on it and just say, give us a call and say, yeah, due to the weather, I'm not going to be able to fly. It's beyond my ability and my limits. And we'll take care of that. Credit cards, I want to do this one more time for the new people. And instructors, be sure on the authorization, the 3-digit code. Make sure that when that person, and you're finished with that student, that 3-digit code gets in there. Rogers had a few new people here that don't quite understand it. Just do a little more explanation on that, please. We had some E6Bs that we've loaned out to people for doing tests, and somewhere along the line, the metal E6Bs have disappeared. So as of today, no more giveaways. If you don't have it, you have to buy it. We've lost these. They've been passed out for years, and all of a sudden they disappeared. So we're not giving out anything. If you need to take a test, you need E6B, you buy it. And it's a blind spot with my 2 radios. I've never had an issue with my aircraft ever since I've been bringing it in here. And I got in a blind spot. I spent 10 minutes calling. I finally moved it another 30 feet, and boom, I'm talking to them. So this is an issue, and I'm not sure. The tower's got some issues, and we have issues, so we're just going to have to try and resolve it. If you don't get a hold of it, maybe he's got an answer. We'll see.
Also the run-up area for runway 3 too.
Yeah, there's a definite blind spot down in there.
Murph, I'm having troubles at my house picking you up too.
Well, yeah, we'll work on that for you, Mr. G. The biggest issue I want to make sure everybody's aware of, we've lost our AOF due to a fatal heart attack, and he was pro Aero Club. We made special deals where you guys could fly on the holidays, not close up the tower, close up the airfield. So it's a big loss to the Aero Club, really. You don't know how much he worked in the back, making sure you guys got to fly, and it's going to hurt a lot. Hopefully, the new person that replaces him comes in as pro Aero Club and continues to allow you to fly on the holidays where you guys get good revenue, and you'll be sorely missed, especially by us air traffic controllers.
Yeah.
You have any questions for me? Other than issues other with radios? My best suggestion is just move up a little bit. Don't get in a hurry to move up too far, because if somebody sees you from the tower moving, well, we might ring out the crash warning for an unauthorized aircraft moving, and that's not pretty. But there's a little leeway over there. Towers understanding. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Bert.
Thanks, Rick.
For those of you who are here at the February 11th safety meeting, that special one that they had, the guy that he's talking about passed away was the big guy that was standing over here, and the big tall guy.
Chris Davis.
Chris Davis.
I'm sorry, I should have announced his name.
Yeah. So some of you were there. That's you know, like Murph said, we need people on our side of this Aero Club. Fortunately, our base commander is being pushed to close it. And I think for anything, he's not budging. I think he's saying, no, I'm not going to close the Aero Club. Unfortunately, he showed up at our base, our Aero Club barbecue last summer. And he came there and saw all you guys working and cooking and doing all that stuff, and he was very impressed at how many people were involved. So he told Bob, he says, yeah, obviously you guys have a lot of people that are participating, so you know, I'm not going to in any way close this club down, even though he's being pushed to do so. We're not the only club, incidentally, either. That's a whole other subject. They're trying to close just about every Aero Club in the Air Force, all the Aero Club managers, even the ones that are making lots of money. They're really pushing it. Alaska, up at Elmendorf, they're trying to shut it down. And they're trying to use the excuse during this time of year, where up there they have the lowest flying period, and they're not making money during those 3-4 months. But the rest of the year, they're making all kinds of money. But see, during the lull, they're sitting there trying to say, well, see, you're not making any money, we need to close you down, you know, and they're doing everything they can to do it. So, not to discourage you, though, okay? We got a good commander on our side, and we just hope that the new manager of the airfield is on our side, too. Okay, while I'm doing Know Your SOPs, why don't Jason and John, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of these chairs here. Why don't you just kind of pull that chair out and make that the back seat, and this will be the front seat. You can set it up how you want to do it. And then I'm going to cover the SOPs real quick. What I do is I cover an SOP subject during each meeting, and eventually over a period of time we go through the whole SOP. And then we start all over again. Right now we're on chapter 1, and we're in paragraph 1.6.2. And this is aircraft charges, your favorite part of the SOP. Let's see, if you're flying on basically cross country, you have the minimum charge per 24 hours is 2 hours of aircraft rate per day, or other than a local flight. So in other words, if you're gone for 10 days, except for the first day and the last day, you're supposed to have 2 hours for each day that you're out. Now, like Frosty over here, he took the T-34 and he flew it up to Reading.
For God's sakes, they didn't wipe the nose down. I've heard it every time. It's almost a year from George every time I see it. I'm sorry. I've only been here for 2 days this time, so you can only blame me for this period.
Next time I'll get you for something.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But when you fly, usually, for the most part, this comes in a factor when you're really flying along cross country. It's some kind of where you're going to be gone for a couple of days, okay? Jason's going to leave tomorrow in the 182, right? 1-5. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you had to take 1-5 Foxtrot, and he's coming back the same day. So, you know, obviously, he's going up to Beale Air Force Base. He goes way past this thing. We've had a couple people take the airplane up to Texas, and of course, you know, the flight just down one way will fill these 2 hours per day in itself just on one leg, you know. So you know, it usually for the most part, I hardly ever have had to charge anybody, you know, an extra 2 hours because they didn't use the airplane. Rarely, as a matter of fact, since I've been here, I've never had to do it. Now, Fred, maybe he has done it. I don't know. So, measurements of charging for flight time. Let's see. Of course, everybody knows it's measured off the Hobbs meter, and if you don't have a Hobbs, then you use the TAC multiplied by 1.2, and it's a wet rate, which everybody should already know that. Aircraft service charges. Everybody knows that if you buy gas in another location, if the price is over the amount that we are being charged, you know, from the oil company, then you pay that difference. So we reimburse you for the amount that we have paid for it, and then you pay the difference.
What happens now if the gas is more expensive here than it is where we're buying it?
You're making money.
Yeah, we get a check.
Yeah.
Don't tell them.
Yeah, this one guy took his airplane to Texas, the guy thought that's what it was gonna have be, and he was much disappointed when I told him, no. So, any questions on this? Okay, all right, you guys ready? Okay, we're on this subject right here. Get started.
Okay, the premises, we're doing a pre-flight right now.
Yeah,
Airplane's a T-34.
and what they're doing is that this is a T-34. They're doing a pre-flight. John's doing what his normal job is in the Aero Club. He's checking Jason out. Jason is a student.
That's
You're both actors right now, go for it.
Yeah.
So we got, of course, we have a script that we've been
Yeah, I gave
looking
him a
at
script.
from Roger, of course.
But don't you know, try to.
We'll try to add a little.
Try to
Anyway,
add.
okay. Okay, Jason, you got everything done on the pre-flight?
Yeah, I know you're busy. I'm busy. It's hot out here. So, yeah, everything's done. Everything's all squared away.
Well, you know, I just came out a few minutes ago, and you it only took you a couple minutes to do the checklist. Did you get everything?
Yeah, it doesn't.
You did?
Yeah, it's not that
So
hard. I mean, I did all the vital stuff.
Vital stuff.
Yeah, you know, look, it got some wings on it. It's got some tires on it. I mean, what? But you and I have done this 100 times.
Did you check the fuel?
Not yet, but I can do it real quick.
Come on.
I don't. I'm sorry, I forgot. I mean, look,
Well,
it's hot.
where's your checklist?
Hold on. I got it.
Hey,
Oh,
I found this
checklist,
laying
checklist.
it says Jason on here.
Oh, thanks.
Know.
Hey, sorry, I left
No,
it. You know, it's just busy.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
rough. It's a busy day.
Yeah.
All right, fuel. Fuel. Yeah, fuel. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we got fuel in it. And you know what? I know it has fuel because George Watson flies it, and I know he fills it up every single time he's on. So we're good.
Okay, we're good. All right.
Academy Award.
Okay, now they're sitting in the airplane getting ready to crank.
You gotta make the cranking sound.
I do?
You gotta participate.
Hey, I am.
Dang, man, this plane just will not start.
Why are you having such a hard time starting this thing?
I don't know. Is it? I mean, I've never flown this plane. Is it just normal or what?
Hey, you ever turn the ignition switches on? Huh?
Oh, hold on. Let me- Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that.
That's on your
too.
checklist too, right?
Yeah.
Get out quick, John.
Yeah.
I think it's item number 8 there.
Okay, now we got it started, right?
Yep.
We got the mags on. Okay.
All right, we're clear to taxi.
Okay, clear taxi.
Are you
Let's
ready?
go.
Can we get going?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Sound effect. Well, what's wrong? Is it brake stuck or?
We need more power.
Okay. Why won't it
What's
get
going on? Did you get the chocks?
Oh.
Sir, do you want me to move your chalks down
Yeah,
here for
please.
you? I was a crew chief a long time ago. I think I know how to do that.
Sorry, it's just
Yeah.
a busy day.
Yeah,
We're trying,
could
we're in a
you
rush.
shut the engine down because I can't, I don't wanna get hit by the propeller here, you know? Ah, gee.
Okay, that's it, guys.
That's it.
Okay, the point is, you know, I see you guys use the checklist, and they do miss some items, so if you do miss some items, point it out to somebody and we'll get the airplane started and get flying, I guess.
Good job.
All right, yes, you guys did a good job. All right. Okay, basically, what you just saw was, what we hope that nobody in the club does.
Heck no, I got my checklist memorized way better than that.
Okay, good. Good, I'm glad you do. Yeah, because some people don't even know what it looks like. I know that we could probably have 100 stories in here on things about checklists and proper use of it. I know Bill does, and in the years I flew as a flight engineer, I could usually tell within 10 minutes on a check ride as an examiner that somebody had not been using the checklist like they're supposed to, and it shows. Complacency is one of the biggies, and I think that, you know, we all get complacent and we start thinking the airplane's like a car. And Bob can tell stories of, and George, of people just jumping in airplanes and just kicking the tires. Oh yeah, the tires are not flat, so let's go. Let me give a couple of things here on stats on what they have done, what they have found rather. This is a survey that was done a number of years ago, and reading some of the NTSB reports since these findings, it's even gotten worse in many ways. Let me just read some of this. What they did here with this particular survey is that they were being very conservative with it. The actual true amount of people doing checklist errors is actually probably a whole lot greater out there. They just either didn't crash or whatever, or they were able to get out of it, or whatever. Out of 44 accidents that they were studying through to NTSB was checklist not completed. There was 7 of them. Incorrect checklist used during abnormal emergency. In other words, emergency checklist. I could bring up a lot of those, especially in the simulator. I did not bring that video on the C5 that crashed back at Dover, talking about not completing the checklist and not paying attention to being situationally aware. One engine failed and they pulled all the engines back, and then or the 2 engines back, and then when they pulled the engines back up, they pushed the throttle for the engine that had quit on it. And
That was a CRN issue, that was, they ran a checklist.
yeah, well, the video, I've shown it to you guys before. I've showed it to you a couple of times, and it's very graphic, and it shows the throttle quadrant and everything. It shows what. The thing that gets me, being as a flight engineer, where was the flight engineer in this? That's supposed to be the job of the flight engineer, to back up the pilots. Yeah, but anyhow, I get upset at that even now. And it's still, you know. Checklist not used, 11 out of the 44. How about the next one? Checklist not followed properly, 19 of them. Checklist not rechecked, 2. And that involves where you're sitting there and you're running, you know, you get interrupted or something like that, or something happens and you go back over the checklist to make sure that you covered everything. Type of checklist errors, the same 44 or different 44, actually no, it was the same ones. Forgetting where you were on the checklist and inadvertently skipping the items. There was 9 of them out of 44. Oh wait, take a look at the next one. Skipping an item due to interruptions and distractions, 21. I mean, that's almost half right there. And intentionally skipping an item and forgetting to return, that's one, and then stating an item that had been completed when it had not. And that's 13, and that's pretty high. A lot of this stuff, boy, I'm telling you, I mean, I've seen every single one of these happen in the Air Force. Not so much in general aviation, although I've known people up in Northern California where I live, out of Ukiah, that didn't believe in running the checklist at all, until the one guy took off and his empennage fell off. And killed him. Yeah, that was it. It was over. Skipping an item due to interruptions and distractions. When I was a flight engineer, one of the things before Bill came out to the airplane to fly it, I was out there sweating to death and doing the pre-flight, and we'd get out there, and maintenance would always have something going on. Always, always, always. And one of the things that we had to learn to do was formulate a way to run that checklist without missing anything. And the way we did it is that we would take areas, if you knew that under the fuel panel check, let's just pull that out, and they were doing something with the fuel panel, i.e. refueling the airplane or doing something like that, then you would skip that whole section on that and then jump to the next section. And then when they were done refueling, we'd come back and then do that section. The whole idea of these distractions is that we're not perfect. We my daughter, she's a psychologist, and I'm telling you, you know, it's the mind. You think that you can handle it, but most of the time you can't. And when you get distracted, your mind gets distracted from what you're doing, and that's what this is for. And as I'll show you here in a few minutes. Okay, they also broke it down into phase of flights. So out of the 44 accidents, it involved pre-flight, there was 2. Before start, 7. Before takeoff, 9. Cruise was 2. Before landing checklist, 23. Again, almost half. After landing, 1. Okay. Yeah. Before landing checklist, the reason why that's probably so high, and I'll just read a couple of them here, is for those like in the T-34s and Bonanzas and anything like that, where the wheels come up, that's a good deal of not getting the gear handle down and totally missing it. How many of you seen the video where they had the guy flying the airplane, and he had a camera in the airplane, and the landing gear warning horn was going off? The whole time he's coming in to land, and he gets down there, and here you hear the bottom of the airplane scraping the runway, and you know, and you see the guy going like this, you know, and he just completely, it didn't even go into his brain at all that what was going on, and that has happened more than once, many, many times. Any questions so far? Okay. These weren't just airlines, okay? You know, I know some of you are sitting there, oh yeah, well that's a multi-cockpit airplane. Well, no. No, a lot of them were Cessna 150s, 172s, 182s. Let's see, here's a home-built Long Easy. The checklist was not completed, and again, it was before landing. The pilot apparently bought this airplane and designed his own checklist. And he patterned it off a checklist from another guy that had a Long Easy. Well, he apparently, the engine quit on him because he did a good job making up a new checklist, but he forgot to add carb heat. And not only that, to add insult to injury, the guy didn't even know anything about humidity and temperature and of dew point and all that. He had no idea that there was such a thing. Now, I have no idea, but it being a home built, I don't know if he was flying without ever having training or what, I don't know. Because everybody, I know that John buries it in the students' minds, and I know Chris does too, you know. Carb heats. Okay, another one, Cessna 150. Checklist not completed. Before starting on this one, the pilot stated he did not visually check the fuel quantity before leaving. The before starting engine checklist states in the checklist, visually check fuel quantity and then check filler cap secure. The aircraft was forced to have to land because he ran out of fuel. Another one, Cessna 182, same thing. He did not visually check the fuel and ran out of fuel. And then there's a whole mess of gear, whole bunch of gear ones. Let's see, another one. This was, checklist was not rechecked before landing. The pilot forgot to recheck the checklist that was on the instrument panel and continued around the pattern, and upon touchdown realized he had forgotten to lower the gear. Brakes. The pilot failed to release the parking brake before takeoff. Okay. The pilot forgot to raise the flaps from full down after the previous landing. Now I know you do touch and goes. I know sometimes, you know, but I don't know. You kind of do it automatically. Of course, you don't have a checklist right in front of you reading it necessarily, but you are ingrained with it. And some of these things are rather interesting. Let's see. Oh, checklist not followed correctly before takeoff. The nose landing gear was chocked. The brakes were not set. The throttle was about 1 inch and the electrical switches were off. The pilot used an improper starting procedure. And apparently it caused an accident. All these are caused some kind of an accident. And the list goes on and on and on. I mean, it's incredible. When I chose this subject, and actually it was John that brought it up, because he observed a couple of times about checklist procedures. Some people weren't necessarily doing them correctly. And so that's why I decided to do this. And at first I started thinking, well, yes, it's going to be hard to find anything because, you know, I can do it with my own personal experience. I've seen it. But then when I got in here and started researching it, holy smoke, they're all over the place, everywhere. It all kinds of stuff. One of the things that you got up there, single pilot and or two pilots, you know, when you're flying the airplane by yourself, you know, now you're going to have to be a little more diligent about using the checklist. The purpose of a checklist is to provide a logical and standard method of conducting efficient and safe flight operations. It also helps with the workload management, transition to a different aircraft, decision-making processes, and establishment of personal minimums. How many here feel like that if you don't have your checklist with you, you know, let's just say, you know, put it someplace, do you feel like, you know, I mean, for me, I feel lost. I mean, I'm like going, where's my checklist? You know? I use them in the office. I don't know how many of you watch me do the accounting and finance. I wouldn't be able to do it. Especially for people like Dave when he turns in his pay thing. To have him from my checklist, he would never get paid. Neither would John. Or Chris.
No, wait a minute. Change the numbers in your checklist as a percentage?
Yeah, well, okay, FAA says that examiners shall place special emphasis on areas of aircraft operation considered critical, which includes checklist usage. And believe me, you know, Andrew's going for a check ride on Friday, and one of those things he's going to be looked at is using his checklist. And if you don't, I guarantee you'll be called on it. Checklist is probably the easiest thing in the world to use. It really is. It's not hard. It's not hard at all. But, like I said, distractions was one of the highest levels of frequency on these things, and you got to really kind of keep your eyes just remember, if you have any kind of a doubt, any doubt at all, just do the checklist over again. Just read through it at the very least and make sure you haven't skipped some. I've done it many times as a flight engineer. I know that most of the people I've known that's flown for many years have done the same thing. One thing I can say in the Air Force, everybody in a multi-cockpit is very aware of keeping track of the other person all the time. If you're up there by yourself, that's one thing, but if you're up there, if you can, take somebody else that's a qualified pilot with you. Always helps. If you're going up in the airplane with passengers, use them, especially if you have an emergency. Because what it does is it helps, and I've talked to some people that have had this happen in real life, where he had an emergency, and what he did is he gave them the emergency checklist to read. If anybody can read, they can read the checklist. And that's exactly, and what it did is it took that worry about what was happening with the airplane and had them focus on reading this checklist. And it really helped the pilot. So, use your passengers, just like I said about for bird watching, people are on other airplanes. Use them, use their eyes too, looking out for other airplanes. I put down at the very bottom, I put down there, don't dismiss that funny feeling that you forgot something. I tell you, I ran the checklist so many times in the C-141 that if I did skip an item, I just had this funny feeling that something was missing. And when I did that, I went back and I, silently myself went through the checklist again just to make sure. And lo and behold, about half the time it would be a real feeling. Because your mind does pick up the patterns. It picks up those patterns. And if you miss a pattern, your mind does pick it up. How many times have you left something at home and you get someplace like Bob with his keys at home or something like that? I never leave anything home. But you get there and you go, that's right. I felt like there was something wrong, And it's something when you use a checklist enough, you're going to get used to that. You're going to get used to it. Okay. Anything else? Anybody has any questions or anything?
Hey, Roger, can I add a few things, sir?
Yeah.
In case everybody didn't catch it, I'm the wing flight safety officer. First of all, before I forget, on the C5 video that he mentioned, by the way, that video was it was illegally, probably the best way to say it, illegally released out to the public domain. Okay, that video was never supposed to have been released, part of the privileged information system. The Air Force said if anybody, they said delete it. If they're threatened, you can be prosecuted if you're at all associated with the government, if you're in a government computer, they're never going to come out after civilians. But please go ahead and just delete it if you have any copies of it. Although you can still find it on YouTube and other places like that, don't have it on your possession. Okay? There's some personal stuff on it that was supposed to be protected to people that was just for accident investigation. Okay, on the checklist, I don't want to talk about guys just not doing a checklist because they say, hey, it doesn't apply to me, I don't care, I've been doing this for a long time. But I want to talk a little bit about the people who say, I run the checklist, I do this all the time, I'm never, I always remember to reset my flaps, put my mixture, put the gear down in the complex airplane. It's never going to happen to me. Think of how many of you guys have been driving for a long time. If any of you guys have never done this, just forgot the coffee cup on top of the car, left the gas cap offside, you pull away from the gas station, you left the baby on the side of the road, whatever it is, I swear this is never going to happen to me, and one of the days it happens. If it has to happen to you, it's probably because you're under 20 years old or some other reason like that. It's eventually going to happen. Same thing in flying. The difference is when you're driving a car, more likely it's just a little bit of embarrassing thing, maybe a lot of embarrassing when somebody posts it on YouTube on an airplane. You take off without the flap set out there, without the right power setting, putting the gear down, whatever it is, you can end up not only as been an airplane, but a fatality out there. Okay, so the key is run this checklist. When you run this checklist, and I'm talking military background, a lot of you guys have military backgrounds too, they drill it into you. Do steps, as Roger was talking about, 1, 2, 3, 4, and run this checklist every single time. And sometimes I say, look, God, I know the checklist says reset the flaps. I know I set the flaps for takeoff power position. Why don't I have to run the checklist? Just do it. Run the checklist and don't stop and get yourself interrupted. If you get a radio call in the middle of the checklist, you know, you can go ahead and either pause the radio call if it's a long one, go ahead and answer the radio call, whatever it is, and then come back and make sure at the beginning of the checklist you didn't miss any items and run it to the end. Do that for every single time, every single event. If you're doing multiple patterns, run your personal checklist. When you're on downwind, you know, if you do a touch and go, if you have a checklist on a touch and go, it depends what kind of airplane you are, how you do things. But whatever it is, do it. And then back yourself up. For us in the Air Force, we drill ourselves with the making sure we have the right configuration before we land, because the most embarrassing thing for us in the world is to land with gear up. But you know, that same thing goes with the flaps or any other power setting or whatever it is on an airplane that's where you adjust the power setting, on the props, whatever. So once you run your checklist, you're done. You hit the base, you start turning base. Have your little personal mental checklist. Flaps, gear, power, whatever it is for your airplane that you're flying. Just do it. You turn final. Do it one more time. Now when you're committed to the landing, do it again. And do that every single time. And most of us are flying these airplanes, the C-17s. So that's, we talk to ourselves, we verbalize it, all that guys talk. Just do it internally. You would say gear, flaps, spoilers, because that's a big C-17 kind of thing. And we do it multiple times. And yes, people don't even hear the other guy say, you say so many times. And you have both pilots saying the same thing. Yourself. If you do a touch and go, you don't have a lot of time on the runway when you do this thing. Reset your flaps, mixture, whatever you happen to do. But you have time when you push the power up and you're looking for that speed to rotate. You have a quick second to look down at your flap gauge, and if you do that every single time, it's going to take just a fraction of a second. The flaps are set, and go. And you'll catch it the one day that you forget to set the flaps there. I saw it on a C-130. I was sitting in the assault zone. I saw a C-130 doing an assault takeoff. After doing an assault landing and then stop and go to assault takeoff, you do it real quick on a runway. If you've never seen the assault takeoff on a C-130, it's a really aggressive pull up like this, and it's basically cleared a tree at the end of the little dirty LZ. And he goes like this, and then a nose drop way down. So what the heck? He forgot to reset his flaps. He had the flaps set at full as opposed to the flaps up. And he basically, I'm sure, just scared the hell out of himself because he's about stalled it out, the aggressive thing out there. It can happen on any airplane. Just drill into yourself, think what you're doing. The most likely thing's going to happen is doing something, it's a habit pattern, and some little thing interrupts it. Just doing a quick check of the NTSB, there's multiple items there in checklist discipline. One is a 727, I think it's United Airlines some years back. They run through the checklist. First officer's run the checklist. He gets interrupted by something. Captain had called for a flap 20, something like that for the takeoff. And then doing this thing, the first officer basically ended up setting the flaps 8. Commercial guys know this much better than what that stuff means, but this is the wrong flap setting. The second officer had different things, restarted the engine for takeoff. They got basically for takeoff earlier than expected, so nobody caught this thing. But at one time, one item on the checklist that should have caught us, the first officer read back the checklist, flaps 8, and the captain said flaps 8. Even though he had directed a flaps 20, the first officer read back something different, and the captain just never really paying attention to the checklist. He's just going, whatever the guy says, you know, you got a first officer, second officer did taken care of. He's just kind of disconnected and doing anything. And then catch that. The second officer was really hurried up because he's last minute kind of things, getting things started, get everything ready for the takeoff, and nobody caught it. And the airplane took off with the wrong flap setting and ended up crashing at the end of the runway. 14 people died in that flight. So it can happen to anybody. It can happen at any moment. And the last thing I want to see is happen to you guys. Please, please, double check yourselves all the time. And if you build that habit pattern, it just takes an extra second. That's all it is.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah. Okay. Oh, gosh, I still have another one in here. Remember, your memory is not reliable. I think I brought that up already. And the bottom line down here at the bottom, remember, you are pilot in command and responsible for the safe operation of the aircraft. Any questions?
There I was.
That's David G., his first time he took his 1872 up. Yeah. And,
Half asleep.
and it took his brother to pull the plane out.
I have a big brother.
Yeah, but to be fair, he had a lot of beer.
Yeah. Okay, make sure you sign the sheet, and make sure you get the credit for this, and for you new guys especially. And I think that's it.